right at the start. I grew up in a small rural town called Bulls. Has anyone heard of Bulls?
Remarkable! It's acceptable!
Hence why Remarkable is such a big part of our business. Has anyone been through Bulls?
Yes.
Okay, so you get it. You understand the whole Bull thing. And from there, I was no Rhodes Scholar at an early age. I couldn't read or write by the time I was 9 because I was very busy on the sports field. I loved to play tennis, I loved to run around and play rugby and do all those fun things. But in the process, I forgot how to turn up to school. So my parents, thankfully, saw the light and sent me off to boarding school at age 9, where I went to Huntley School in Martin. And a pretty frightening story I remember was going to the new entrant exam. And the new entrant exam, thankfully, was a multi-choice exam because I couldn't really understand what I was reading. And I went through and guessed the whole exam. And when I got there on my first day, unbeknownst to me, they'd actually scaled you as to how well you'd done in that entrance exam. So if you're very intelligent and very bright, you were sitting by the window with a nice window view. And then it went down 3 rows, and the not-so-intelligent ones were sitting beside the door, which obviously had a quick exit on the way to the headmaster's office. And I got there and was very proud of my seat right beside the door until the teacher stood up and said, well, I just want everybody in the room to understand where you're sitting. The scholarship boy's out the back there, and I don't know how he described me. I think it was academically challenged. I came back from my 7th form mainly because my single focus at that age was actually to run for New Zealand.
Wow.
That's all I ever wanted to do. I just, from a very early age, wanted to run for New Zealand. And at that stage, I was running 160 to 180 kilometres a week.
I thought you were going to say miles an hour.
No. So I was a little bit like Forrest Gump. All I did was run. And that was my life. And he told me that I couldn't come back. And so I defied that and came back to school where I wanted to make something myself and actually be this athlete. And I had to win and get a B qualifying standard for the Olympics to achieve my goal of getting a scholarship to Oregon State University. And so I came back and I did pass bursary. As I said, I basically just got through, did enough to get through school. I was certainly not an intelligent chap, and some may argue I still aren't. I did get my goal. I did win the Nationals, and I got a B qualifying standard for the Olympics. And a week later got accepted to Oregon State University.
All right. Had you left the country before that?
No, I hadn't. I'd only been on a plane twice before that. But unfortunately, 2 days after that, it was the first massive crossroads in my life where I wrapped my car around a tree at age 18, 10 days after leaving school. I fell asleep at the wheel and woke up 5 days later. And when I woke up 5 days later, the first words I heard out of the surgeon's mouth was, "Sorry, James, you're never going to walk again." And I was like, hang on a minute. I was heading off to Oregon State University to run and do all these amazing things. And so I had my first massive crossroads in my life at age 18, where basically the rug had been pulled from underneath me big time, and had to reassess what I was going to do.
We hear a lot of setbacks here at Startup Grinds. People trying to start a business, it not working, trying to get funding, it not working. I think it's probably the first one of just about dying.
Yeah, it wasn't very pleasant to go through that process, but I now know what I went through back then certainly has allowed me to do what I do now today.
Did you recognise at the time at 18 years old that this was, I mean, because you were a pretty focused chap, albeit that you weren't reading right into the best of your abilities, but even at that very young age you had that focus.
Yeah.
At 18, did you see this as a huge setback? Did you feel like giving up, or was it just another challenge for you?
Honestly, I thought my life was over. I mean, I'd spent from age 6 when I saw John Walker run at the Olympics. It was like, I have to do that. That's something which I want to do, and every day I went out running, I saw it, I tasted it, I heard the voices on the sideline. I visualised winning that medal from age 6.
So voices and
the whole
and
thing,
visuals, and
everything.
No
yeah.
tablets to control that at all.
No, age 6 I was. And then by 18 it was taken away from me. So I spent that summer in bed, obviously, and made a decision that I wanted to go to Otago University. So I got out of the wheelchair and was able to be assisted on crutches. Went down to Otago Uni to do physiotherapy and physical education.
There's a lot. I was going to say, being out of the wheelchair would have been great because there's a lot of hills around there, eh?
Not good going down Baldwin Street on a wheelchair, especially in the Jaffa race, which happened. But yes, went there to heal myself, and thankfully, end of my second year, I threw my crutches away, so I was able to walk, which was a massive moment for me. And I was like, well, shit, I can't run, so what can I do? So I started skiing and got into competitive skiing.
I can barely run, let alone ski, and I love that you've just gone, what can I do next? Maybe sit down and read a book, James. Or take up knitting, skiing.
Remember, I was not good at reading, so I didn't have a
lot that's a really good point.
I didn't have a lot of options, so it was skiing or I was too young to drink, so basically get into something outdoors. And skiing was great because it was my ankle which was badly shattered in my accident, so it encapsulated my ankle, so it kind of protected it. And that was good. So I went off and did crazy things on skis for a while.
Far out. So was skiing then your absolute main focus? Because we all know that you ended up being CEO of New Zealand Ski. Was there anything in between that, or was it just blinkers on, snow, pizza, French fry, pizza, French
So you
fry?
have been skiing?
Oh yeah, I've been falling.
Right. No, look, I had a lot of fun. So when I left university, I went off to Aspen, Colorado, and I'm embarrassed to say this, but I saw that. Has anyone seen that Aspen Extreme video? Really cheesy about ski instructors in Aspen.
Is it an actual documentary? Dude, we love the snow!
No, it's worse. It's
It's worse.
don't watch it. But
You know everybody's going to Google and YouTube this now.
I followed that dream and went over and with some mates from uni, and we went over and they went for a season. I stayed for 5 years.
Wow.
And it was just an amazing time. It was just a phenomenal time, and that 5 years of just letting loose and having a good time, and then of course my seriousness took hold of me and created a business in Aspen. Went back to Sydney where I met a lady, which always happens, doesn't it? And she's now my wife.
So I knew you were going to say that. Nobody ever says, I met a lady and she turned out to be rubbish. She was a bitch.
Well, she might watch this, and there'll be the three people who will actually
Mrs.
watch
Coddington, I love you lots.
it. So we went back to Sydney and took our company, which we created in Aspen, and we floated it on the stock exchange in Sydney.
So back up, what was this company?
Travel.com.au.
And?
It was a travel business.
I just understand that. But was there anything that made it stand out from all the other travel businesses that would have been around at the time?
.com.au.
Okay, right, fine, it was Australia.
So, no, what I'm saying is it was the first .com business
Right,
to float on the stock exchange.
right.
And it was 1998. We were a traditional travel business. 3 businesses came together. We were the ski part, the wholesale part, travel specialists, and another cruise business. And we amalgamated and called ourselves travel.com.au. And that floated on the stock exchange and had a wild couple of years. And we left.
Just trying to imagine what earth you were getting up to for
Well,
those couple of years.
Look, it was
Pretty
a
heavy,
fun
isn't it?
time. If anyone can remember back in those dot booms, it was fun. You know,
Yeah.
anything with .com.au or .com after your name, you were valued at some ridiculous multiple. And we rode the ride and
So
created
you said
some.
you had 3 different businesses come together. What were the early business lessons that you would have learned from those mid-90s times?
Which I can share. Wow. I think it was travel.com.au. The biggest lesson was what not to do.
Yeah.
So I wasn't CEO or I was part of the executive team, but certainly wasn't making the main decisions, we got $52 million from the float, and we had an $18 million turnover. So if anyone knows anything about travel, you're lucky to have a 3% margin. So we had a 3% margin on 18 million. I mean, that kind of gives you some idea of the size of our business, but yet we were valued at over $50 million. And our CEO went off and spent a good amount of that in 2 years. And so a big lesson was, always, it doesn't matter what money you actually have, always value what you have and actually spend it wisely.
Yeah.
And that's probably held firm for me today, and that if you're going to go out and get money, get enough that it'll keep you keen and keep your business lean, but it won't create sloppy attitudes or sloppy decisions.
Those 3 businesses that came together, were they friends or just acquaintances?
Yeah, they were friends. I didn't know them.
Right.
I was introduced by a man called Bill Gear, who actually I skied with in Aspen. That's how we made the connections.
Yeah.
And they all had traditional businesses, and they had a dream to, they went and bought travel.com.au, and that was really the value of the business.
Wow. So we know that there was a .com crash. And how did that affect you?
Well, thankfully we got out. I wasn't. So our shares which we got for that float, we were able to sell. So we weren't under escrow or anything. So we were allowed to sell our shares. We sold our shares, which were given to us for the business which we created in the first, I think it was first 45 seconds of the float. It went up to $3.
Sells out faster than a Rolling Stones concert.
Well, interesting. We had a very good broker because he said if it hits $3, you sell.
Right.
And he sold it at $3.10, and it got to $3.19, and it went south.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was very
that
good.
Close.
And I think it was trading last year at about 3 cents, and it was bought out by Webjet. So Webjet now owns travel.com.au.
Is it luck? Was that luck, or was it?
It was total luck. That was total luck. We had no.
Was it finding somebody who
expertise.
really, really did know what they were doing?
Well, look, it certainly wasn't us. We didn't have a clue what we were doing, but we entrusted this broker, and he said, "Look, if it hits $3, then it's a really good sell for you, and you should just leave it with me and sell." We didn't know whether that was going to take a month, 2 months, or 45 seconds.
Far out.
Yeah. So we were lucky, and that created a foundation for us to go and do other things.
And what did you go and do?
I set up a veterinary business.
A what?
A veterinary.
That's what I thought you said. Cats and dogs and... Oh, I've got a sore paw.
Yeah, so we set up an online animal health advisory portal, and that morphed into a point of sale for veterinary practices, which morphed into a franchise with 138 vet practices in New Zealand.
But how did you go from skiing to
Hang on,
cats?
I'm not skiing yet, so I haven't got to the skiing part yet. I was just
sorry. Right, okay, hang on. No, you skied and then you had a travel thing. How? Cats.
Cats. There is some logic to the madness.
Go on.
My father is a vet, and he needed some serious help with his IT.
Right.
And he saw what I'd done in Sydney, and asked for some help to create him a website. So going into his business and immersing myself in his business for a few months, I could see where the opportunities were.
And is that something that, again, I'm just pulling this up because I hear this from a lot of people from Startup Grind, the immersion of being, just really getting involved with whatever it is that you're concentrating on at the time, to just get knuckle deep into cats in this instance.
When you say it like that and look back at that, it seems crazy. But I just saw it as another business.
Yeah.
I saw it as a business with an opportunity, whether it was cats and dogs. The opportunity came from the lack of ability for vets to manage and run their businesses. They're very, very good at being a vet, but they're not taught at vet school to run and own their business.
Yeah.
They're not taught the basics. So we set up basically an IT infrastructure to allow them to do that, and it was so good that different practices asked to have it, and then it just kind of went from there. So,
and you experienced that people came to you and said, "Hey, this is a really great idea. We want to get in on this." We basically need this service, or did you have some kind of vision? So I think that a lot of entrepreneurs and startups tend to look a little too far into the future. Maybe it's really important to set goals, but the moment that you start thinking about, and then this will happen and this will happen, you kind of lose track of what's going on right underneath you.
Honestly, I was living in the moment.
Yeah.
And it really didn't have a massive vision back then. I was just probably months in advance as opposed to years in advance. And just executed on what it was we were trying to achieve and then move on to the next thing. And I was there doing it for 7 years. So that was way longer than I went over to spend a month with my father.
Yeah.
So
and 7 years later,
turned into 7 years.
Lots of cats.
I didn't really do a lot with cats and dogs.
Damn it. So, after the incredible success, by the sounds of things, of this brilliant veterinary point of sales online service, where did you go from there? Does it back to skiing?
Yeah, that's when I did get back to skiing. So when we left, Mandy and I left Sydney, we knew what we were doing within the veterinary industry, and we knew the vet practices were scattered throughout New Zealand. So we said, well, where do you want to live? And I said that to my wife and said, well, where do you want to live? And she said, well, sorry, darling, there's only one place I'm going to live in.
Don't tell me she said Bulls.
She didn't. No, she said Queenstown.
Okay, no, that's pretty cool.
And so we went and lived in Queenstown 12 years ago. And when it was, I wouldn't call it the Wild Wild West, but it was back then. It cost us $1,200 to come up to Auckland and back. So it was very expensive.
Holy crap!
Yeah, so we didn't
Buy
have
your own planes.
Yeah, right. So we didn't have 5 direct flights a day back then. It was tough. It was challenging, and to do business down there, I was in the plane 5 days out of 7.
Wow.
And so it wasn't really good for family life. And we had a child in the middle of that, which was probably more miraculous than anything. And I wasn't at home. And then I read one day in the paper that the CEO of NZ Ski had resigned. He'd been at NZ Ski, well, wasn't called NZ Ski at the time, it was called Southern Alpine Recreation. And he'd been there for 22 years. And I was like, wow, that's my dream job, man. He said, go for it. Go for it. I said, and at the time we were about to float Vet Service on the stock exchange, and we were kind of going through the whole due diligence process, and we were about 18 months away.
Due diligence is so much fun.
And it was scaring me, to be honest, because it was kind of going back to what I did at Travel.com, which wasn't something which excited me. I've never been about the money. It's not. It's about actually doing something which means something to you. And I started to lose my way a little bit within Vet Service, so it was a great opportunity to get back into a business which I loved, which was the ski industry. But as an advice, if you love skiing, don't become the CEO of NZ Ski, because you don't get to ski.
That sucks.
And yeah, I became CEO of NZ Ski, and I did that for 6.5 years, 7 seasons.
Oh wow!
Which was fun. I loved it, but it was incredibly challenging.
What did you achieve in those 6 years? What was different with the company from the day that you walked in the door to the day you walked out the door?
I think the biggest challenge for me was working with someone else. I've always been doing something for myself, whether I had some equity in it or doing something where I had some ownership in it. So to work for somebody else as an employee was a really big, massive change for me. And a challenge which my friends gave me 3 months.
Really?
Yeah.
So your mates believe in your heaps, eh?
Yeah. They're good mates. No, they just know me.
6.5 years later, though, you would have been like, ha.
Yeah, but we had our moments.
Yeah. Did you employ any of your friends?
No. I think it's a lesson I've always learned.
Yeah.
Try not to do business with friends, and certainly not with family members. As I was explaining a story earlier, did business with my brother who's in Brazil, and it didn't work out so well.
Ouchie. And unfortunately, it's not easy to come back after heated words with family members, I guess.
Their family, blood's thicker than water, as they say.
Yeah. It's interesting. We've had a couple of guys sitting in the hot seats of Startup Grind, and have actually done really amazing things with their brothers. But I've often wondered, really, on the face of it, you're saying that it's all good, but we know what being with family is like. I mean, I can barely make it through Christmas, let alone an entire business with my family.
Yeah, I couldn't do it. I mean, my father was involved in the vet business in early days, and we didn't talk for 2 years. So we had a pretty big falling out.
You guys good now?
Yeah, we're good now.
Yeah?
Yeah.
No more cats.
No more cats.
6.5 years of not skiing at NZ Ski, which must have really bugged you at times.
Yeah.
What did you do there? Surely that must be one of the perks of the jobs.
Well, it is. I guess you get the free skiing. But it's kind of like, I don't know, if you own a restaurant and you go into your own restaurant for a night out and have dinner, well, you're not going to relax.
Yeah.
You sit there, you're looking at all the things going on around you, you're like, oh man, what's going on? Why aren't they doing this? Why is this table isn't cleared?
Yeah.
So you just never relax.
Why did you leave there?
Ultimately, to follow my passion and my dream, which was always right from a pretty early age to create a brand. I wanted to create a brand, not just a brand which was for New Zealand, but a brand which was built on iconic New Zealand values, but you could take it to the world. And I think over the period of my schooling in business, I learned that the more you give, the more you give back.
Yeah.
And I was very selfish early on in my professional career. It's all about me, and I wanted to do these things, and I wanted to do it now and fast, and have that nice car and nice house and all of those things. But somewhere along the line, that all kind of fell away, and it actually became helping other people. So thankfully, Tony, my business partner, who was supposed to be here, I don't know where he is. We sat down together 2 years ago, and I know Tony very well through our daughters. Our daughters' best friends at school.
How old are your kids?
11.
11. You just one?
No, 2. I've got 2 kids. I've got a 2.5-year-old and an 11-year-old. Same wife. I have to always say that. Yeah, so they're best friends, and but Tony had spent 250 odd days away from his family because he was running Icebreaker all over the world and creating the international brand. So I didn't get to know him as well as Mandy and his wife, but heard he'd retired from Icebreaker, and it's like, well, we've got to connect because you've got amazing skills which I really want to tap into. So we'd start off just having a few beers each week, sharing some beers and sharing some ideas and sharing what we wanted to achieve, and pretty early on we realised that we had a lot in common and we wanted to do something together. He'd worked for some of the best brands in the world but never created it himself, so we decided on week 3 that we were going to go and create this global brand.
So we've got Icebreaker and a guy who loves snow. Now I've done a little bit of research on you, and penguins keep on popping up over and over and over again.
Yes.
They're pretty cute. Was it always going to be based around, I don't know, something chilly, something cold? I know you keep on saying it's about that Kiwi-ness, but god damn it, there's a lot of other things apart from ice cream.
Yeah, there is. No, I mean, we were fortunate enough to start with a blank piece of paper. So we literally started with that. We didn't inherit something, we didn't buy something, we didn't bring in someone's ideas. We wanted to create something from scratch. And so if anyone's creating a business, I'd certainly recommend the scratch version as opposed to buying.
Yeah.
Because you can create a business based around your values. And by week 3, we'd listed our 10 values, what was really important to us.
Yeah, I've read them. They're pretty good.
So that was going to be the big rocks for us. We weren't going to...
Have you guys read these values? Would you mind if I just read them out very, very quickly? Yeah. I mean, when you read them, you think...
Tim knows them off the top of his head.
when you read them, when you hear them, you think, yeah, well, I mean, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? But I want you guys to really think about this. How many companies do you know that have these words and really, really think about them? Number 1, authentic. We are what we say, always, not just when it suits. Number 2, honest. Even when it's hard, and especially when it's hard. Number 3, trust. Good people do the right thing. 4, entrepreneurial. Give it a go. Give it a go. See number 6 first? We'll skip down to that. Number 5, generous. In thought, spirit, and reality. Number 6, focused. Less is always more. 7, disciplined. I really struggle with this myself. Freedom to act quickly within a framework. 8, fun and edgy. It's very Kiwi at heart. 9, learn fast and often. It's one of the things we hear all the time. Don't ever stop learning. And 10, world class. If it's not the best, then keep on pushing. And these are buzzwords that we hear all the time in business. But this is the first time that I've seen them grouped together with those just short, sharp explanations that I really do believe that you guys built a beautiful idea around.
So that was written down on the serviette on our 3rd week. And some of those values have got us in trouble because we've trusted some wrong people. We have chosen some wrong partners to get on board with and back some wrong people. But ultimately, we still stand by those. And our challenge is, do we deliver on that every day? No. But do we try to? Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to stand by. So when we wrote that down on the napkin, that was the foundation of what we're going to build our business on. So we went from there, and then we said, well, we want to create a really cool business, a business which we're proud of. We jump out of bed and go, yes, this is something we're doing which is making a difference. So we wanted to create something. So we looked at, flirted with leather of all things. Through our research, I don't know whether you know, but 90% of all Louis Vuitton's leather comes from New Zealand.
No.
Seriously. Yep.
What kind of cowhides?
Yep, and deer.
Far out.
And it's coming from Timaru. And we're like, wow.
Timaru!
And you know what? If that spread around in social media, I wonder what the price of a Prada bag would be.
I'm going to start that chain of gossip. How funny.
So, we've flirted with all sorts of different things. And, it's two and a bit years we've been playing around. And we decided on our business model well before we came up with our vehicle, being ice cream. And so we wanted something world-class, but then we were like, well, through the research we found out there was over 100 million unemployed youth in the world. We're like, that's a really big number.
This part came second. You knew you wanted
Ice
to
cream,
create something amazing from New Zealand with these core values,
Yeah.
and the remarkable unemployed part came second.
Now, the remarkable unemployed was part of
Right.
of that. What came second was the ice cream.
Right, okay.
So that was last. So through our research, we're like, well, if you're going to create a big brand, a brand which is meaningful and actually is going to have some impact on the globe, you've got to be connecting with a pretty big number of people. So that's when we found out, this remarkable unemployee was a big problem in the world.
Is this a term that you've coined yourself,
Yeah.
or has it been out there before?
We like making up words. So remarkable unemployee, a lot of people are like, so sorry, how does that work? Our definition of remarkable unemployee is remarkable individuals which are either unemployed or underemployed. Underemployed just means that people who have the skills, abilities, they're just selling themselves too short.
Okay.
Or in dead-end jobs or
Yeah.
that type of thing. And so we started to create this business model built around creating an opportunity for remarkable unemployees and created that business model around that. And we didn't have the vehicle. And it was actually a dinner here in Britomart one night with one of our consultants. We went for a walk up Queen Street to Giappo's. And anyone been to Giappo's?
It's crazy.
And had a
moving
conversation
there.
with the owner who calls himself I think an ice cream scientist or something, and he absolutely is. He's got a PhD in making ice cream. Quite incredible. And this guy is passionate. Boy, is he passionate. And there was a 45-minute line. This is at 11 o'clock at night. And Tony and I are waiting in this line, and this crazy guy comes over and starts talking to us. He didn't know who we were. We didn't know who he was. And we talked to him until about 12:30 that night, just talking about ice cream. And when Tony and I were walking down, eating our fantastic ice cream, I might add, they do a great job up there in Giappo's, we looked at each other at the first lights of Victoria Street, and we looked and said, ice cream, that's got to be good, right? And so we went back to the hotel. I don't think either of us really slept. And I was Googling ice cream makers, best ice cream in New Zealand, and we both came up with that Kapiti was both of our favourite ice cream.
Yeah.
It's like, well, we've got to find out who founded Kapiti. So good old Google. I don't know what you did before Google,
God,
right?
nice. Sent some carrier pigeons, smoke signals.
And so we're like, okay, so who founded Capity? So Ross McCullum came up and we got in contact and he said, would you want to make us ice cream? But we want to do it differently, Ross. We don't want to just make ice cream here in New Zealand and ship it to the world. We've got to come up with a new way of making ice cream. So we want to create a micro-manufacturing facility which we can take to the world. So it's making fresh ice cream in every country around the world, but they're using New Zealand dairy products. And he's like, okay, let's work on that. And so we worked on that for quite some time. And Ross, to his credit, did an amazing job in coming up with the model to achieve what Pride and Joy is all about.
So is it the ingredients that are Kiwi sourced, or the equipment as well? Because I don't know much about ice cream, but I know it's not just something that you can stick in the microwave, and that's not the right thing, is it? But the equipment behind making this as well, is this a Kiwi thing?
Yes, it is. It very much is. We didn't want to go to all the other dairy companies.
Yeah.
Won't mention any names, but we wanted to go to a boutique dairy company which has amazing milk and cream. So we approached Green Valley Dairy, which is, I don't know, many people know where that is. It's a small dairy farm, which is the largest organic dairy farm in the country, and they produce their own milk, and they do Lewis Road, Lewis Road butter, Lewis Road cream, milk, etc. We thought that was a fantastic product, so we have exclusivity with those guys to make our ice cream.
Could you imagine if you were lactose intolerant, you wouldn't be able to test anything? It would have been a very uncomfortable process for you.
You're probably right, but our chief testers were not us.
Yeah.
Our chief testers were our kids.
Ah.
And we actually brought our kids on our board as our advisory board, and they
That's
loved
pretty
it.
cute.
We even printed cards for our daughters, and they went to school very, very proud of, I'm on the advisory board of Pride and Joy, until the teacher said, what's that? But kids, why kids? Well, shit, they tell you the way it is. Our kids are not trying to get a job with us, they're not trying to impress us, and they're certainly not on the payroll, and they tell us quite blankly to our face if it's rubbish. So we brought ice cream home, which is challenging, I might add. We live in Queenstown, our production's up in Auckland, and our first time doing that, I arrived late to the plane, and they wouldn't put the ice cream on the plane. So I said, well, Merry Christmas, I guess you guys are going to have a lot of ice cream in your office.
They wouldn't let you do
I
that.
have to leave the ice cream on the counter with Air New Zealand.
Air New Zealand's. Look what I've got. I don't know anything. This is the salty ball one. It's great.
Salted balls is not the technical term
No.
for the ice cream.
Was it salted something?
Caramel.
Salted caramel. It's pretty good. Salty balls. Not balls. Okay, right. So we get to this point. Where does the remarkable employees come in? How does the business actually work? Because I think that's what a lot of people struggle to get their heads around. It's ice cream and you're helping people.
Yeah.
But how?
So you got to put the ice cream to one side. So that's the vehicle. So the remarkable employees is the centre piece to everything. We wanted to create a brand which actually could help and assist the global problem of increasing unemployment for the youth. And it's massive. It's a massive problem which is not being addressed at all by any government. It's been swept under the carpet. A lot of them would like to think that they are addressing it, but really they don't know where to start. And we're seeing a lot of very intelligent, very educated individuals literally sending 200 plus CVs around organisations which won't give them an opportunity because they don't have the experience. So 20 years ago when you left university, you were fortunate enough to have the pick of the jobs. It's not the case anymore. And I also think that the culture of the Y generation and even the millennials, they want more than just have a job. They don't just want to jump on that corporate ladder and start to go on that conveyor belt and go on.
Yeah.
They actually want to make a difference, as corny as that might sound. They actually want to create something which means something for them. And the hardest thing about entrepreneurial, the entrepreneurial step, the first step is the hardest. Where do you start? How do you start? Where do you get the capital? And who's going to support me through this process? So that was the biggest challenge which we saw, was finding the right people, because we know there's no shortage of unemployees. And what we found, that there was a shitload of people out there which didn't want a boss. They know they don't want a boss, but very few of those had the ability, drive, passion and attitude to actually become a successful entrepreneur.
It's a sort of seesaw there, isn't it? So you recognise this, and you coined your remarkable employees. So just expand then, what's the next stage of your business model to give these guys that first step up onto the ladder?
So we've recognised, I've talked to now over 500 individuals in New Zealand on Skype about their passions and desires to
Where did you find them?
They find us.
Right.
In that they literally get between 10 and 20 emails a day for individuals who want to be part of Pride and Joy. And usually in the first 10 seconds in a Skype call, you can tell whether they have what it takes to be a Pride and Joy podster or not. The next step for us is about putting people through a process so they're tested before they actually come to us, and that's the Pride and Joy Academy. So we have a Pride and Joy Academy, which is an online collaborative learning environment where people can go on for a 30-day program. It's not in New Zealand yet. They go through this 30-day program. There's different tests through IQ and EQ tests, but it's Pride and Joy eyes, so you don't feel like you're applying for a bank. You don't
feel like you're sitting next to the door in the classroom.
Yeah. Sorry, bankers over there. It's about making sure you've got the high standard of person before you invest time and energy.
Did you say that it's not in New Zealand yet?
No, so we have taken all our data, the 500 odd interviews which we've done in New Zealand, and created this Pride and Joy Academy.
Right.
And we are creating that based around the inputs which we've had from our experiences in New Zealand.
Right.
So one of our challenges is we want to take this globally. So New Zealand's a small part of our business, but right now it's everything, because we have to create the success around New Zealand. So when you go overseas, you're not there. Obviously, you're not there to interview everyone. So you have to create something which creates the necessary steps to go through if you're doing a Skype call, and also allows you to get the necessary quality of people which you're looking for.
And I take it you're factoring in that New Zealanders are really quite different from people from out the rest of the world. You know, an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, 20-year-old here from, let's say, Te Puke is going to be really different from where I grew up in London. Considerably different. A lot nicer. Anybody from Wembley at 20 years old is a bit of a git. So how are you going to basically put your model into, let's say, London, and ensure that what you've learnt from here in New Zealand will apply to that delightful generation from London?
It doesn't matter where they're from, the same skills and abilities and attributes we're looking for. And that's the key to the online learning platform, because we actually want everyone to go through that platform. It's about finding the right people and making sure you're putting them through the necessary steps and tests to ensure you do find the right people. I'm sure some people will slip through the cracks, but the one thing which we value most above money, above everything, is time. We don't have an unlimited amount of it, and we need to make sure we use time very effectively and efficiently. And if we don't do that, we're wasting theirs and ours, and it puts us back behind where we need to be.
All right, so I'm 20 years old, I'm fresh out of uni, I'm really not finding the job that I want, don't even know what the job that I want. But I find Pride and Joy, and I start going through the academy. What hoops do I need to jump through, and what am I going to get at the end of it?
So 30-day program, there's 2 modules that you have to complete each week. And those modules are both character, personal, professional, aspirational, and until the second week it comes into more business development. So if you were to have this business, how are you going to create your business plan? So at the end of the 30 days, you not only come out with a business plan of what you're wanting to achieve, but you also come out with a personal development plan as to where perhaps some of your attributes need some work. And those are the key areas which you need to be working on. And people do get culled out after week 2.
Are you giving them a business? What are they giving you in return? Because I know there's these beautiful shiny pods. I'm sure some of you've seen them here in Auckland already, and they're pretty freaking cool. But what do I have to give you as a 20-year-old in order to... So I just have to pass these tests to show you that I understand how this business is going to run.
It's the first step. So you have to show that you're not only up to the challenge, but you actually have the necessary skills, abilities, and attitude to take on that. And one thing we've found in New Zealand, and it's probably the change of what we've done, we started off by giving people a business. They pay us money, we give them the business. We learned a lot from that, and probably the mistake which we made was assuming that they were able to take that challenge on at an early stage. So they can't do that anymore. They have to come on board as an employee for a period of time, and I think it's best for both sides so that they can work out pretty early on, no, this isn't for me, or yes, this is great, and I'm really excited and passionate about making this work.
And then if they hit the KPIs, they then get to...
They get the option to buy the business.
Right.
And be part of that business. And the other thing which we've found in New Zealand, I mean, you see that trike back there.
Yeah.
Our biggest challenge is to create as low a cost of entry as possible. Ideally, we'd like to give it to people and allow them to run and operate their own business from a trike or from one of those shiny pods or whatever, but it actually comes down to fitting into the city. So that there, we'd love to be running around Auckland, but Auckland Council say, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, no, you can't do stuff like that. I've had a terrible time on the Segway recently.
Right, we won't ask about that. The pods itself, you know, the biggest challenge which the podsters face is actually finding locations for them.
But they're very mobile?
They're movable. We have a mobile pod which actually can be towed behind the back of the car.
Right.
But that is, so there's 3 different pods. There's a movable pod but not mobile, a mobile pod, and then a trike.
Okay.
So those can fit into different markets. And actually what we've found is Auckland is the toughest place for us to operate by a country mile.
Wow.
I can put a pod into Napier or into Wellington.
And where are you throughout New Zealand?
Well, we're in the process of rolling. We want to have 15 by December, so
yeah.
We're in the process of getting consents in 15 different places in around the country.
What's the longevity of somebody being from entry level through to going from a trike to a pod, let's say? How long am I going to stay within this model?
Well, we think around about, depends on the individual, 1 to 2 years,
right.
Realistically, because our purpose of our business is to entrepreneurise remarkable individuals which are either unemployed or underemployed. So when you take that on board, it's not actually about creating franchises for individuals and giving that to them for life. It's actually about creating the opportunities for these individuals to learn, grow, and develop necessary skills for them to go and create their own businesses.
Yeah.
So 2 years we would think is probably... I wouldn't think too many people would be staying much more than 2 years.
How do they exit? What's the deal
We
there?
have a foundation which 10 cents of every ice cream goes towards this foundation, and so when you leave Pride and Joy, you can pitch to actually have them fund your next idea.
So there's this philanthropy through frozen dairy goods?
Through ice cream.
Through ice cream.
Yes. Every ice cream sold, 10 cents goes towards their next step.
That's incredible.
And it's not just philanthropic, it's actually what we call smart business, because these guys are proven that they're successful at what they do, and most of them have fantastic ideas, and we want to be part of it.
Are you going to be part of it for them moving forward? What happens for James Coddington and his crew with those remarkable, now no longer unemployees, beyond Pride and Joy?
We would like to think we've got a network of really smart, capable individuals.
Are you creating an empire?
No, we're not creating an empire. we're creating opportunities for individuals to go on and do other things in their life. And what we'd like to think is, you know, everyone we can take off unemployment benefit or taking them off dead-end jobs,
yeah.
And creating opportunities for those individuals. The biggest thing which we see is their self-confidence. Their self-confidence goes through the roof. When they start getting success and start seeing that they can actually achieve these milestones, that's when the real magic happens. And that's when we can sit back and go, you know what, this is working.
It feels good, eh?
It feels really good.
Would you have done this 10 years ago?
No, I'm too selfish. And I was too driven by my own aspirations. Thankfully, through my years at NZ Ski, I had 1,200 staff there, and 95% of them were Y generation. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot talking to people like yourself. We had a lot of people from the UK who, and Ireland especially, who did not have jobs, and they were out for what they called a gap year, and they kept coming back year and year and year. And the lucky ones actually got sponsored, and they came back and actually made a life of it in New Zealand. But through that experience, I could see that there's these amazing individuals which just didn't have that first step. Where do you go to take that first step? I just wish there was something like this for me. When I left university with a physical education degree, before I went to Aspen to have a great time, I sent my resume around 120 different places around New Zealand.
It's demoralising.
I just wanted to be a sports coordinator. That's all I wanted. I wanted to be a sports coordinator in a school or in one of those sporting houses which are run by councils throughout the country. And I did not get one response, not even an interview. And I said to my mum, sorry mum, but this kind of speaks volumes, so I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And thankfully I did. I got out of where I was. But part of that journey helped me understand, what my brother, who's 9 years younger than me, experienced when he left university as well.
Have any politicians come knocking at your door? What's your relationship like with local government, national government?
To be quite honest, we have purposely not integrated into any government or had any discussions at all around funding. We wanted to prove the model first and be able to go to them with the story. We haven't had that conversation with WINZ or anyone like that yet.
This is a new experience for me. I'm sitting next to a very accomplished businessman in essentially the first year of a new business. That is, I'm not going to say finding its feet, but it's still at that very exciting, how is this going to pan out stage?
Yep.
I'm very excited to see where this is going to go. So I know you guys have got a lot of questions, but before we do, everybody, underneath 2 chairs in this room right now is a prize! Go on, stand up. It's time to stand up. We've all been sitting there for far too long. Have a look under your cushions, underneath your chairs. There may be something amazing there for you. I'm not going to say that it's a free ice cream because we've already got that. Not for you, Sim. Say no. Anybody else? I genuinely actually don't know where they are. Anybody? Oh my God, Michaela, did you do? Oh, hang on, what have we got? $50. You've got a $50 bar tab. I am your best friend right now. Anybody else? What did you get there? You got yourself a fully stocked bar barista for 6 months. Not forever. No, congratulations. You've got yourself a 6-month casual membership. Excellent.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, I know. It's pretty good. We like to give away an awful lot. All right, guys, sit down. Do we have questions for the lovely Mr. Coddington? We've covered an awful lot thus far, but I can't help but feel that you guys probably want to ask a few more questions. Or you're just going to be looking at the vouchers and wondering how much alcohol you can get out of the bar. More than likely. Even ice cream flavours, because I'm really having a really, really good time over here with, what's this one?
Salted nuts. Let's just call it salted nuts.
Salted nuts is the way to go. There's a prize for the best question as well.
So what's your marketing strategy when you go overseas? How can you, like, from this small place in New Zealand, really target all those people overseas, and how can you attract those people that are unemployed?
Yeah, it all relates back to the unemployed. One of the reasons why we chose what we're doing was we felt that the unemployed network is very strong and very connected, and if we do a good job in establishing ourselves and making a difference in people's lives, that will create the necessary credibility as we head into the other countries. There are some areas of what we call stunts, which we like to do. So we've just done a ZM promotion looking for New Zealand's most remarkable unemployee on the radio station. Those types of things will be done well before we enter the market. And we also launch the Pride and Joy Academy 2 months before we actually are in market. And we provide every unemployee and unemployed person the opportunity to go through that 30-day program for free.
So you say for free, it would necessarily cost them to go through that?
No, so we provide them that access for free,
Right.
and it's funded by us basically, because the tests which you go through, they're not free. There's a real cost to those.
Hello.
Thanks, James, for being very open with us. I really enjoyed the story. I'm left wondering a few things like, does James earn his own living out of this? Or ultimately, my question is actually, is Pride and Joy really a not-for-profit?
Interesting, we get asked that question a lot. Our business model is simple. When the Pride and Joy podsters are successful, we're successful. So we're not successful right now because we don't have the critical mass of podsters on the ground, which we always knew. We have to create the network in order to create the business. But it's what I think is probably the most important part of the business is if the podsters are successful, we become successful, and we've got a very simple model. The more ice cream sold, the more money we make.
What happens in winter when it's chilly and I fancy soup instead of ice cream?
Well, we do sell soup.
You didn't say that before.
In New Zealand, we are selling soup in some locations, but that won't be a global thing. If we weren't in New Zealand, if we didn't live in New Zealand, we wouldn't be here doing what we're doing. It doesn't fit our profile at all. From a population demographic, density of population, weather, bureaucracy, all of those things just don't fit the model. So we wouldn't be coming here. But since we live here, it's been great to test the model in a much more challenging environment. So winter is challenging, so we're in the process of moving our pods out of the summer locations into the winter locations. So you'll see us in malls and various other places like that. It's a big test for us, but we see it as a great opportunity. As all other ice cream stores are kind of closing their doors and hankering down for winter, we want to make a real noise, and we want to use winter as the opportunity to create our brand.
What's your ultimate goal for this? Let's say we've shifted on 5 years. Where is Pride and Joy going to be?
5 years, 50 countries. We want to be in 50 countries and 50 pods in each of those countries.
Big numbers. Pretty excited about that. I really think that this is going to be a really interesting one to watch. This has been easily one of it's not been tough for me to get my head around, but it has been just the simplest of ideas and yet the biggest of challenging ideas for the end consumer, for the people that are going to be potentially working for you, working for themselves. And yet you're sitting there cool as one of the ice creams that will be provided from one of your pods. How confident are you? Pretty fucking confident.
Yeah, of course we're confident. We have to. But, I mean, we're no different to the podsters who are going through their own journey. We've had massive setbacks through this process, and daily we get setbacks. I mean, today I had conversations with a person who had given us a site, and now they're deciding that they don't want to give us a site. Now that happens weekly, and that has a big impact on our business and flow down into the podsters and how they can operate, where they can operate, through to funding, through to all the normal setbacks which you have. And if you don't have a full belief, 110% belief in where you're going, your vision, your purpose, give up, because there's no point.
Is that your final word on it? What would be your advice to this room of people who are working on their own dreams right now? What is the James Coddington piece of advice to people who want to be James Coddington?
Don't be James Coddington. It's too fucking hard. Follow your dreams. Without sounding too corny, if I hadn't jumped when I had jumped from NZ Ski, I would have been there for another 20 years.
It's a pretty cushy job.
I wouldn't say cushy, but it was very... it delivered to all my needs. I mean, it was challenging, it paid okay, and I got to live in Queenstown and be home with my family. It was pretty cool. And in my opinion, it's one of the better jobs in Queenstown, so I was fortunate. But if I didn't jump when I did, I could be there for 20 years. But I just had this nagging thing in my gut telling me that, got to do it now, James, you're 40. And no, it wasn't a midlife crisis.
No, that's what the 2.5-year-old is about.
We won't go there. But I hear so many times in this type of environment of people who, and there's probably people in this audience right now who have things which they've written down in their books which they want to achieve. The one thing, the piece of advice which really resonates with me is the very best idea executed poorly is way worse than the very worst idea executed really well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how good your idea or how great your dream is, if you executed on it flawlessly, you're going to win. So believe in what you're doing, believe in your gut, believe in where you're going, and ultimately you'll get to where you want to go.
I've got goosebumps. Anybody else?
James, thanks for the opportunity to come here today. You came up obviously in one of our coffee conversations, and basically I want to know your franchises. There's a buying cost, I think that came up about $20,000. How do you expect unemployed people to raise the funds, and then what's your guarantee on your franchise if it's not successful?
Great question. It's 30,000, not 20. Try and get a discount. We started off with, we got a pre-approval loans from BNZ. So BNZ bought into the idea, they understand where we're going, and the feedback which we got from the podsters who went through BNZ was much more challenging than what we would have hoped or liked. So it didn't matter what your background was, they were going to give you funding because we guarantee to buy back the pod, whether it's successful or not. So if you give us $30,000 and it's not successful, we buy the pod back less depreciation. So whatever the depreciation is of the assets, whether you're staying for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years, we guarantee to buy that back. So the risk for the bank is very little. But where we're coming from, and why I think that's a great question, is what we've learned is $30,000 might as well be $3 million. It really it puts a massive barrier up. So what we're now looking at is getting an external company to finance all the pods. And so the pod owners don't have to put any money up front. They pay a monthly fee to rent that pod. And so instead of paying $30,000 and paying the bank over 3 years, but you do get a lump sum back when you leave, you actually could be paying $375 a month and not get anything back when you leave. And the feedback we've had is that would be much more digestible for people to enter.
I mean, let's say I rented a spot downtown that was $900 a week and was only turning over $500. Is that responsibility now on myself? Or?
Ultimately, yes, because that's part of the entrepreneurial journey, is that we want you guys to find your own sites. We want you to go through council, through the rigorous process of getting consents if it's in a public space or if it's in a private space, working with the landlords of that space. And if it's not working, you need to have the fortitude to put your hand up and say, guys, I need some help. And Tim's sitting right beside you is one of our podsters who can tell you exactly that we do help and help them find different sites and even take them off the, put them in as an employee so they've got guaranteed income over that time and process, because we're entering into winter, which is very unknown for us as well. But the key thing for us is we want to remove all barriers for these individuals. If they're the right people, we would like them to come into the business to learn the necessary skills and abilities to actually become a successful entrepreneur.
Anybody else? Yeah.
James, what was your first company that you weren't able to fund entirely yourself, and how did you make the decision that you needed to go and source funding from somewhere else?
Yeah, the first business was Aspen Spirit, which is I set up a skier improvement program in Aspen, obviously, what's the name? And I realised that we needed some funds because I couldn't pay the rent. And when you don't pay the rent in Aspen, it's pretty cold living on the streets. So I approached a friend of a friend, actually, who I was teaching at the time. And it was, for me, it was a massive amount of money. It was $20,000, and that saw us through that first season. And then when we got back, I'll never forget it, when we got back to Australia and walked into the bank asked me for the credit card, and he got his scissors and chopped it up in front of us because apparently we'd maxed out our credit card.
So that actually happened?
It actually happened, yeah.
Wow.
National Australia Bank in the corner of George Street and whatever that other one is, Pitt, I think it was. Quite demoralising, but I realised that we had to do it, and it's probably the hardest thing was that to get your head around, you have to give some equity away in the bigger picture. And we still grapple with that now. We're going through some funding at the moment to launch our global operations, and we don't want to give equity away of our business because we know where it's going to go. But short term, you have to think more longer term and say, well, you can't grow the business. It's much better to have a smaller piece of a much bigger pie than having a bigger piece of no pie.
I love pie. I'm sorry, I just like pie. Somebody else had a hand up. Over here. Sorry, I'll get to you in just a second, my pretty. Go ahead.
James, I was really interested in the beginning part of your discussion where you said you had a desire to create a brand, based on New Zealand iconic values and that it's been world class. And when you've gone through and discussed with us, you created this really beautiful story about helping people, and it's a great story. But you started out wanting to create a brand. So, what's your driving force? The brand?
Well, I think.
James, I'm just going to reiterate that just for the mic. So, it's okay, my son. So, is the driving force the creation of the brand or helping people? Is that right?
What's your driving?
Yeah, what's your driving force?
Well, I believe any great brand has a story behind it, and for us, the story is our brand, and we talk to the podsters every day about sharing our story, getting our story out there as much as possible because it is authentic and it is what we do, and that's what separates ourselves from any other ice cream company. And the more people who know our story, connect to our story, and connect with the podsters, but behind the counter or behind the trike who are selling ice cream, ultimately they're going to walk past all the other ice cream stores to get to that ice cream because they're connected to actually helping people as well. And that's very, very important to the brand because that is our brand. Because our brand is our people, and our people are remarkable unemployees, which will one day be successful entrepreneurs.
Do you see the remarkable unemployees, that term, that title being almost as bigger than Pride and Joy? Is that what you think that this is going to be recognised as? Because I bloody well hope so. It's definitely written with me.
I'd like to think that it's synonymous. So that's why we wanted to create words which are not necessarily everyone uses. So when you hear remarkable unemployees or even the term unemployees, we'd like to think that people will automatically think of Pride and Joy. And when they meet the people behind the counter, they're like, those people I connect with.
Yeah.
I want to buy an ice cream from that person because I love the story, but also the product is pretty damn good too.
Yeah. My darling girl, hello.
Hi, James. Yeah, I know you have planned to expand your business to 15 countries in 5 years. So have you considered the different culture, how to meet the different culture? And also, different countries, they have local brand of ice cream, and some are very good brand. So what's the strength of your business, of your ice cream? What's the difference?
Okay, I'm just going to repeat that just for the microphone again. So your plan is to expand out into at least 50 different countries. How are you going to meet the different cultural expectations, and how are you going to compete against some of the really bloody good ice cream options that they actually have there in those countries? Yeah?
Yeah. Great question. Ultimately, it comes back to the power of the brand. And the brand, as I just said, is all about the people and about the remarkable unemployees. So we're not just ice cream. we're actually creating opportunities for these remarkable individuals to go and create a next step in their life. The cultural differences in each of the countries, yes, that's a challenge for any export company. For us, one of our greatest challenges is to find the right people to be country partners. And we work closely with NZTE to achieve that. And it's about working, we've got a profile of that, how that partner looks, what the qualities they need to have in both the company and individual perspective. And we're looking for, we're looking for the right person to actually represent our brand in each of those countries. That is probably our key decision which we need to make in order to expand our brand. Once we've found those people, we work with them behind the scenes, but ultimately it's up to them to develop the brand within their country. So they're responsible for the cultural differences. They work with us if there's branding changes or if there's label changes or anything along those lines.